Hello everyone, so I'm going to be making this video to update my previous tier list that I created for ANVIL speedrunning through Campanella Extreme. This is going to be aimed towards solo. In the multiplayer setting, some of these will be bumped up a little bit higher or a little bit lower, but they still relatively will stay around the same power level. To begin with, I'm just going to give the same disclaimer I gave in the last one. I still think tier lists are kind of bullshit. They shouldn't be used as a way to persuade you to play certain characters, and they shouldn't be a way to persuade you not to play certain characters. This is just clearly here to be a visual way of representing the relative strengths of each character when weighed against each other in a speedrun setting. All characters can still beat the game using either weapons or skill-related builds. It comes down to player knowledge and experience within the game to really master on how to do that. With that being said, disclaimer out of the way, let's start with someone that's since Season 3, it made a lot more fun due to the multipliers they have, but still have some relative issues in terms of just general kill speed and general, like, just early game burst, and that will be Bronte. She is going to sit comfortably at the C tier, and these are going to matter in terms of where they're placed, so the ones that are on the far left are going to be better than the ones on the far right, for example, in terms of their kill speeds and just general consistency. So Bronte still suffers with her clear speed. She has issues of you need a lot going for her to get her doing big chunky damage and removing health bars of bosses with Detonate, but thanks to her new buffs to multipliers and general love that they've given her, she is in a much more comfortable spot than she was previously. So she's sitting in the C tier, which is going to be basically characters that just need a little bit more love but aren't necessarily doing terribly. Next up in this list is going to be Draken. Draken is going to sit comfortably in the B tier. He is just okay. So he kills things relatively fast, he does good damage, he has amazing burst. He is limited by the fact that he is a bleed based breaker, so that means no matter what happens in the run, he's going to get to Arctic gear and it's going to slow down at Arctic gear, but then speed up again afterwards. He is still limited by the fact that his animation speed is really long. So that means his biggest burst with Blade Shock and Hack and Slash take a while to fully come into fruition, which adds basically 1 or 2 seconds on per planet room, which doesn't sound like a lot, but when you have 9 planets each adding 2 seconds, that's an 18-second time deficit when you could be making up that time playing a different breaker. But nonetheless, he's still really fun. Season 3 really didn't see much changes for Draken. He is all he really got was adding and shifting around some of his resets on counterattacking, but if you've seen any of my other videos, you would know counterattacking isn't necessarily something that you want to be doing when you're speedrunning, due to the fact that if you're in a situation where you can counterattack, you're not doing your burst damage. That being said, moving on to the next one, Elsa. Elsa's going to be in the A tier. Elsa has some amazing damage. She didn't receive any buffs in this patch, but due to the fact like stuff like Restraint and other big relics have been added into the relic pool for Campanella Extreme, this helps her get crit capped much faster, as well as just generally lets her have different relic starts than she previously did, and this just lets her do a lot more damage. If you manage to get a really good run going with Elsa and you have all your beam upgrades and you have your defense shred by the time you get to planet 5, then even the fact that Arctic gear is immune to freeze will still let you melt Arctic gear. Now, she can't go into S tier because she requires a lot more than the characters that will be in S tier to get going, and also, again, Arctic gear is immune to freeze, so that means she loses her multipliers on Arctic gear, which is a big problem for her. Next up, I'm going to rate Uzi. Uzi's going to sit in the same tier as Bronte. They both pretty much have the same issues. Although she did receive love in the patch, and it was very nice for her, she still has an identity crisis where you can go skill build on her and it hits pretty hard, but it requires a lot to get going, and they still have funneled a bunch of weapon power stuff into her upgrades, which leaves her in this limbo of some things give weapon power, some things give skill power, and they clash with each other, making her just awkward. But she is buffed and she is doing better, so she's not deserving to be down here anymore. She is in a good spot. There is possibility that she can get good times, and she might even sit up here eventually. Don't know, more testing needs to be happened really. But I am going to now move on to the first character that's going to go into the D tier, and the D tier are basically characters that are going to need extremes amount of love, and they really need to address systems around them to make them better so they can actually function, and that's going to be Toast. Unfortunately, Toast did receive a bunch of buffs, and they were great for him. In a seasonal setting, it's very good for him as you can avoid things that cause him problems. But in the Campanella Extreme setting, which is Tierlist is orientated around, Protean Beast is still going to be your crux. The fact that there's a fire planet that is mandatory within the run means the buffs that they gave to Toast mean nothing, as he is not going to be able to utilize his burn multipliers that they've given him. Now, when you can actually use these burn multipliers, and you're on stuff like Arctic Gear, Toast can do some serious damage, and he can hit very hard with a missile launcher build to the point where it's honestly really fun. But that being said, Protean Beast is still pain in his ass, and it's always going to hold him down until they address the issues of burn characters not being able to utilize their multipliers on planets that are immune to burn. Coming up to the first character I'm actually going to bump up to S tier now. She has moved up in her world. She has gone from being a character that was alright to now a character that's amazing, and that is Shuri. She is doing incredible in this patch. She received a bunch of love to a build that I regarded as a meme build last season, which was performing okay but was just memey because it was spamming tornadoes. Well, they buffed it by 200%, as well as just giving her more petrify targets, making that build a reality. She can basically perform the same as like Sandman's job in a solo setting, but with more consistent damage, making her just a bit better than Sandman in terms of DPS, but Sandman still can do his job much better than what Shuri can. But she is phenomenal now. In a great run, she can rival times like that Jungler could almost put up in a good run, and she can also match the damage of lightning. It's incredible. Move along, next we're going to put Rush. Rush is moving to B tier. They gave him so much love in this patch, they gave him so much more damage, his beams feel much better used, his defense shred's a little bit awkward being on his lightning flash now, which is a bit weird, but manageable. And it does help because you can use that as a gap closer and then immediately start applying all your debuffs and beam. And beam can melt. It does pretty good damage. He is limited by the fact that he is a heavyweight breaker, so he needs a lot of like crit chance relics to get going, but he can do crit defender stuff. But his damage isn't anywhere close to the characters that are going to be in S and A, so it kind of limits him on that fact. Coming down now to Guillotine. Guillotine is going to be a character that I'm putting into B tier as well, just behind Rush, as although he can do fantastic in seasonal, and I've shown the clips, he does extremely well in the seasonal runs. Again, he has the same problem that our friend Toast has, where his burn multipliers are useless, which slows down his kill speed on Protean, which makes the difference in a fast time and a alright time. Now, every other planet that's not burn though, he can do great damage on. He can sometimes one bang to just removing multiple health bars from a boss with just one executioner in a build where you've got like all your damage relics and you've got all your upgrades by planet 7. But again, because Protean exists, he's forced to be taken down on the totem pole a little bit. Now for the next character, I'm going to have to preface this. I'm putting him in C just because of the fact how he functions. So he got some love in this patch. So he's doing a lot more damage. But the problem is he's very slow like Draken, doesn't do anywhere near as much damage as these characters, and to get him going requires a lot. Like, you need to have your meteor smash upgrades, you need to have your jump shock upgrades, and you need to have some relics on your back to be able to really remove health bars. And then his cooldowns are relatively long as well, and the counterattack builds, like I've previously mentioned, aren't great, as you're going to be sacrificing strong relics to make those work. But that being said, he did receive love, so he's no longer a character that's like, oh my god, please help me status. He is now just a character that's alright. Now, moving on over to Lina. Lina's going to be put into A tier. Now, Lina primarily runs with a weapon build, although I've been testing stuff with a skill build and seeing some good results, just not quite on the same levels as weapons yet. His damage is really good. Unfortunately, he is then held back by the quality of the weapon he holds. So, if you find a Venom Rifle, which is a must on his weapon builds, and it's not rolling great, then your run's just going to be slower. That's just the way it is. Now, the fact that he can start with 100% crit wire helps a lot. The fact that he can increase his fire rate by a lot helps a ton. And the fact that he has multiple ways of avoiding having to reload, making it so he doesn't have to ever use infinite mag, helps a metric ton. He got a bunch of more crit damage buffs in this patch. He does have burn multipliers, but those are nowhere near as an issue on him. They do not scale as high and are not as required for characters like Toast, etc. And the fact that he can have his fire rate get to crazy levels without much effort means that he can utilize reactors really well, helping him scale his damage very, very well throughout the run, as well as proc freeze reactor pretty much on demand when he wants it, which helps him with skipping phases on Protean. Now, he's not in S tier because he is primarily a weapon-based breaker, and weapon-based builds just don't function that great in the grand scheme of things. Now, the next character I'm going to put on this list is going to be an S tier, and that is Lightning. Lightning is still an S tier. He's always going to be an S tier. Unless they nerf Shock and they nerf him directly, he is always going to be an S tier. He gets access to the Crasher within the runs, gives him 100% crit. Shockwave is hitting much, much harder now, thanks to the fact that they've given him more shock multipliers. And with some finagling in your relics, you can actually run without turret ruse now as well, which does affect you a little bit of your early damage, but increases the speed in which you can get to bosses because of the fact you can use your lightning slide to get there. Since you're going to be lightning sliding early anyway to apply your shock target multiplier, this is great, as it's going to shave off 1 to 2 seconds depending on the room of travel time getting to the boss. You have much, much higher burst now, and he's just fantastic. He is technically still a little bit better than Shuri, just because of how much damage he does. He doesn't have to scale up like Shuri does, so he will be positioned in front of her. And now we're going to put the obvious Kingpin in there just to get him out of the way, Jungler. Jungler received no changes in this patch, Jungler received no nerfs in this patch, and they've added more skill power relics into the loot pool. This has only been good changes for Jungler, and good buffs for Jungler. Jungler is just the king of damage. No one can one-shot a boss quite like Jungler can. Like, he is pretty much the Kingpin. He is the poster child of Anvil for a reason. Now moving on to our next breaker, it's going to be Quake. He's going to be an A tier. He's going to sit just behind, just behind Elsa. And in my opinion, this is just because of the fact he has the projectile issue, which is always going to be an issue on characters like Quake. He can do attack defender starts with Venom Caster and Mercy and get crazy levels of attack power. He received a bunch of buffs to his skill power on punches, as well as various other little tweaks here and there on his skills, just leading to him becoming more of a powerhouse again. Now, there is a possibility that he might be even better than I'm representing here. It's just I haven't had any god tier run on him yet where I can see his full potential, but he has got some crazy potential. I just don't think it's anywhere close to the people that are in S tier right now. Moving on to our final candidate, and that's going to be Sandman. Sandman, in my opinion, is always going to be ranked in S tier as long as he can do what he does, because no one can do what he does better than he does, which is he can defense shred, he can give himself a bunch of damage via his crit multipliers, his sand snipes can hit incredibly hard, and because of the fact he can petrify on demand with his survival skill, he can guarantee phasing on bosses, like skipping phases on bosses, which help him a lot, and just in a multiplayer setting as well is pretty much mandatory to get insane times. 90% of what we do in Anvil would not be possible without Sandman being like he is, so there's just no one more deserving to be in the S tier. He didn't receive any love in the patch, but that doesn't necessarily mean he got weaker. It's just other things are slowly being kept and brought up to Junglers and Sandman's power level, which is something I said in the previous video, tier list video, of how they don't need to buff or nerf these characters, they just need to bring people up to their level, which is fantastic. That's what they're doing. So this is the tier list. I think it's pretty accurate to how things are currently in the game. I might swap one or two things here or there, maybe with like testing, like Rush I think will stay in B tier, but Mountain maybe will overtake Uzi. I feel like that's a little bit better. Like, Mountain and Uzi are relatively close in power level, but he doesn't require near as much as she does. Quake, I think, can be S tier, but for now, to be safe, I'm just going to leave him at A. He's a skill build, so he does defaultly just beat Outliner. And Dragon's always going to have these issues as long as his cast times are really long. They can buff his damage as much as they want, but if it's going to take me 3 seconds to land a Blade Shock due to the fact how long it takes to charge it, then he's always going to be 3 seconds slower than a jungler, right? So, that's just the way it is. Anyway, thank you very much for watching, guys. Let me know if you would change anything in your experiences on speedrunning within Anvil on this list, but I feel like this is pretty accurate to how things are currently in the game. Like, comment, subscribe, I'll see you in the next one.